Super duper. So today we are going to be doing a session on pedaling. I did ask for some ideas on ideas for sessions, and I think it would may have been Ilse who said do a session on pedaling. I thought great idea. I know we've touched on pedaling before, but I think to cover the uses of the pedal, what does what, and it's always a good excuse to use my pedal cam, which is down here. And you'll notice it's clean as well today. I've actually got it dusted, so I'm just going to move the camera around a little bit, then you can see the pedals, and we can talk about the pedals as we go. I was going to put some shoes on, but I was just too comfy in the house, so I've got the house slippers on. Is it right that Americans don't have slippers in the house? Is that a thing that I learned? I'm on a group on Facebook called the Dull Men's Club. And there's a lot of kind of banter between Americans and English. And somebody said, "Oh, you don't have slippers in America, do you?" Is that right, Mark? You don't. You're on mute, I think. But
Yeah, I have like four pairs of slippers.
you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I have
There you go.
slippers.
You have slippers. Yeah. So
Yes, especially
I,
with hardwood floors now.
yeah.
But when you have rugs, you don't need slippers. But
I
when you have
suppose.
hardwood floors in the wintertime and snowing outside, yeah, you need slippers.
Absolutely. So yeah, so I've got my slippers on anyway, as you can see. I thought that was a very English thing, but good. I'm glad I'm multinational. Right, so pedaling. We're going to look at the three pedals, what they do, when to use them, more importantly, when not to use them. Pedals are all about when not to use them because most people will overuse pedals like crazy. And we really don't want to be in a situation where we're making our music really. I'm just going to turn it up ever so slightly, I think. That might be a little bit better. I'm assuming you can hear me. Yeah, good. Normally I forget to turn the original Sound for Musicians on. But it's very, very easy to kind of, it's very easy to mush things up. And we never want to use the pedal to mush things up. But let's not get ahead. Let's look at the three pedals that we've got. You can see on my pedal cam, as I like to call it. So your piano will either have two pedals or three pedals. And if it has two pedals, it will have the left one and the right one, and it won't have the middle one. Some pianos, if they just come with one pedal, will come with the sustain pedal if it's just the kind of thing that you stand on a stand and then you put a pedal underneath. Usually the thing in the back will be for a sustain pedal if you use an electric one. And so we're going to work through the pedals, which feet to use on what, when to use them. So we're going to start with this right pedal here, because this is the pedal that of course we use 99% of the time in music. It's the one that gets really abused as well. The what people call the sustain pedal, but it's really called the damper pedal. Because what actually happens in the piano is that when you press a note, you're probably aware that on a real piano, when you press that note, there is an attached hammer, and that hammer hits three strings, bang, like that. And as it hits the strings, there's a felt damper which lifts. And the key not only throws the hammer, but it lifts the damper as well to allow the note to ring. And then as soon as we take our fingers off the key, the damper comes back on, the felt damper comes back on the string. Interestingly, the hammer is on and off with one action. Nothing happens after that with the hammer, just goes on and off, but it's the damper that makes sure the note carries on ringing. So the damper's off, and then we lift the note, and the damper goes back on again. And that happens individually with every note on the keyboard. When we press the right pedal down, using our right foot, as soon as we press the pedal down, all the dampers are removed from all the notes. So the notes then are allowed to ring out. This is why we don't call it the sustain pedal, because it does more than sustain. If you're familiar with the idea of sympathetic resonances, the idea that frequencies affect each other. When we play one note and there are no dampers down, then that note will then vibrate other strings in the piano if there are no dampers attached. And so we can use this particular pedal not only as a sustain pedal to sustain notes as long as we want them, but we can also use it to create a fuller sound, to create a richer sound by allowing all the dampers to be removed, and then whatever notes we play will also vibrate other notes on the piano and create this richer sound. So, and sometimes we'll just want that particular effect. We'll talk about in a moment the different methods of pedaling, but that's really the two main uses for the damper pedal. One, to create a sustain, and two, to create a fuller sound. In terms of using the pedal, people think you either put the pedal down or you lift the pedal up. That can be true on some electric keyboards, but is not in effect what happens. It's a gradual thing that when you start to press a pedal down on a real piano, the dampers immediately start to lift. And so it's not just press off, lift on. As you press, the dampers will start to come off. Like that. So that's dampers completely down now on the keys. And now we've created something a little bit thicker. It's not quite a sustain, not in the same way, but we can do something called half pedaling, which is just finding just on the bite of the pedal. Electric piano, I mean, this is obviously an electric piano, it's got that built in, it grades the pedal, and you might find that your pedal does that again. You don't see that written in music very often, and that's just code for I've never seen it written in music, but it's good. You can kind of experiment with things that don't use a pedal if you want to create a little bit more fullness in the sound. You know, just a bit of Bach that I like to throw in. If you don't want it quite so choppy, not that Bach would ever have been played with the pedal, but it's good to experiment and just see what happens. So you have these this halfway point, and then of course you can continue down to a full sustain. So that's the up and down motion of that pedal. If we just look at, for a moment, let's just look at how the pedal is written. So if you look under the second bar of this this piece of Ravel, I picked this because in looking for a piece of music that actually had pedal marks on it, it took me ages. I've got a ton of music on in a folder, and just finding something where the pedaling is marked on took me quite a while. It took about 10 minutes, and then I found this piece of Ravel with the mark underneath the second bar that says ped. And when you see that ped mark, then all it means is to push the pedal down. And we'll keep that pedal down then, that's an A minor, isn't it? We'll keep that pedal down until you see the asterisk. In this case, in the brackets. Sometimes there's an asterisk, sometimes there's a line after the pedal to the point where the pedal is raised. There isn't really a standard way of notating that, but very often you'll see pedal for down, asterisk for up, and that's the neatest way of doing it, because you don't end up with a load of lines underneath the music, which you could do if you're not careful. So a lot of the time you'll be left to your own devices with pedaling. It will be a case of, should I pedal it, should I not pedal it, what should I do? And you'll very much have to find your own way through pedaling, unless you're taking one of my courses where I talk about pedaling, and then I'll talk you through the pedaling. But generally speaking, you'll see the music and it's left to the performer in a lot of cases to decide where to pedal it. Plenty of composers do put pedaling on. Chopin put lots of pedaling on. They are out there, but when you actually try to find one in the heat of the moment, it is quite difficult to do that. So when you see that ped mark, it's always referring to the damper pedal, the right hand pedal. So let's look at how we play the right hand pedal then. So there are, as I said, there are two main uses of the pedal. One of those uses was to create the extra fullness. And in order to do that, all we have to do is just pedal with the note. I don't know whether on your screen that pedal looks like it's going down slightly late when I do that. It does with me. I'm actually playing the chord and the pedal at exactly the same time, but I think it's the camera that's just... Which way around with it? Oh, that looks like it's together. I've got to play that early to make it look like it's on time. There you go. So when we play the pedal, all we're doing at that point is we're creating no sustain, but we're creating a bigger tone. Imagine you're doing in the opening of some sort of big concerto, or you could kind of use your pedal not to do any sustaining, but to open up the whole sound to create a nice big resonant sound with your instrument. That use of the pedal is probably, I don't know, plucking percentages out of the air, used about 5% of the time, and the other 95% of the time we use it for connective reasons. And to do that, we use a technique called indirect pedaling. So this is the mainstay of everything we do with the pedals. Of everything you do with the pedals, you will do this probably 99% of the time. Indirect pedaling. So you're joining things together. So when we join things together, and we might want to join things together for all sorts of reasons. Maybe we have things that we can't reach. And so when we, I mean, for example, when we play when we play the first Gymnopédie, for example, it's without the pedal, it becomes very, very difficult to make anything of that whatsoever. The pedal is absolutely integral. I went to look for the music for this, for Gymnopédie, convinced that there would be pedaling written in it, because it's so, you know, you need a pedal. No pedaling in that at all. So you got to work it out for yourself. So what we would do in this case is we would play the first note and we would depress the pedal. And then as we play the chord, we lift the pedal as we press the note down and then re-depress the pedal. So now the note's still ringing. Same again, as I go for the second note, I'm going to lift the pedal and re-depress it, take my hand off, lift the pedal and re-depress it. Like that. So what that's ensuring is that I'm getting a connection between the two notes, because you've got to lift. If I play this directly, it doesn't join. You can't join them. So pressing the note first, going up down on the chord, up down, joins, up down, like that, up down, up down, up down, like that. Okay? This up down, as I said, is called indirect pedaling. It's worth practicing indirect pedaling because you're going to be using it all the time. And all you've got to keep in your head are the words up down. So every time you play something, up down, up down, up down. the best way to practice indirect pedaling is just playing one note at a time and seeing if you can link a scale together just using one finger. So just by going like that. But you can see I'm going up, down on each note, up, down. Now, if you do it wrong, you can hear, and you really need to be listening to your pedaling, because I have loads of, or I see loads of people, or I have done over the years, who don't realise when they're pedaling, they're mushing things together. Like that. Don't know if you can hear that. But I'm mushing the notes together because I'm not cleanly lifting, I'm pushing back down again on the note. It's one movement. And it'll become one movement. Now, when you practice this, it feels horrible when you first start to do it. It feels completely counterintuitive. But when you stick with it, you find that actually it will become very, very fluent. Again, if you take your foot off too quickly, then you'll know you're doing it wrong because you'll hear the gaps in between the notes. And what some people do wrong is that they'll play a note and they'll take the finger off the note and then take the foot off the pedal. They won't keep the finger down. So if you can hear that you're connecting the notes together, but you're not blurring them, you're not leaving spaces, then you know you're doing it right. But the words in your head are not on the first one. You can do what you like. You can put the first one down, just a direct pedal with the first note. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And then just kind of progress to whatever you want. Just, you know, and any little thing that you want, right? Do the same thing with two hands. Again, just trying to join those together. Go as slow as you like. Whatever speed it takes. If you're lifting your fingers off the note early, make sure you catch the pedal before you lift your fingers. I can't do it wrong now. Sometimes that happens because you don't get the foot, when you do the up down, you don't get the down quick enough. When you first start pedaling though, put the down on a subdivision of the beats. So if you're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and actually make the down part of the rhythm, it just helps you to kind of find the flow of it. Eventually, you'll just put your foot down independently, but it's a good way of getting into that flow, to think about the down as up, down, up, down, up, down, and there's a rhythm to that, like that, and so on, and then you know you're doing it right. Let me just check to see what my next example was, because where are we? That was the next one. Oh no, that was the Ginopédie. I was going to show you the Ginopédie. Just show you this actually, because it's interesting. If you look at this, that's a pretty early version. I don't know whether that was one of the original prints of Ginopédie, but you can see there's no pedaling on it. There's just that and that all the way, unless of course, just thinking about it. No, I was trying to let Satie off the hook by suggesting that he might have suggested doing that first of all, and so he wouldn't need the pedal, but he didn't, and then bring it in here like that. But no dice, not a pedal mark on the whole thing, so you're left on your own to work out the pedaling for that. If you are, well, we'll talk about how to do, how to work out your own pedaling. well, we may as well talk about how to work out your own pedalling. Now you know how to do indirect pedalling. If you look at that, for example, how would you know when to put the pedal down, when to lift the pedal up? A little bit of experimentation might give you the answer to that. If I put the pedal down, keep it down. Let's go back to the pedal cam again. So I'm keeping the pedal down. And so there's a mush, there's a blur going on. Even for this kind of impressionist music, it's a little bit too blurry. We don't want to blur that much. So a good way of deciding when to change the pedal, one of the most basic ways you can do it, is you can look at when the harmony changes. So if you look in the first bar, we've got this particular chord, and all that's part of the same harmony. And then in the second bar, we get so two different chords, and that just rotates, carries on for quite a while. So we don't want to mush those two chords up. So all we do is we pedal down, play our first chord, and then when we have the change of chord on the start of the second bar, we do our up down, making sure we've not taken our finger off the D before we lift. Otherwise, if we do it the other way and then we do it the wrong way, if we're too quick trying to do that, we won't catch the note with the pedal. So we've got to make sure that the pedal goes back down very quickly before we lift the D, like that. And if you do that, that will give you a really nice, smooth background for all that, And then the second question becomes at that point, well, yes, okay, so harmonically, we're separating the different chords with changes of pedal. That's absolutely fantastic. But what about the tune? Can we mush the tune up? Yes, we can. On this occasion we can. It's not always advisable to mush your tune up. In fact, most of the time you don't want to hear the pedalling as such. You just want to kind of feel the pedaling, what the pedal's doing. You know, we don't really hear the pedaling there. For all anybody knows, we could have two people on the piano doing that. You don't hear the pedal. But as soon as you start going, because it's a descending phrase as well, that makes matters worse, because we hear the pedal more when the notes are going downwards than when the notes are going upwards. And what you'll find is you can get away with a lot more pedal when the notes are rising than when they're falling. But here they're falling. Why can we get away with it? Well, two reasons. One, because it's Impressionist music, and Impressionist music followed the whole Impressionist art form movement. It's an impression of something. It's a kind of blur. If you squint, it's like squinting at the piano. And so things can be a little bit mushy in Impressionist music. So stylistically, we can get away with pedal. But the other thing is, it's a lesser of two evils. We have to do it, otherwise we can't play the left hand. So it just becomes a balance. Well, do we pedal, don't we? Well, we have to. So we're going to have to put up with that. There is no way to pedal that where the left hand is doing its thing here and the right hand isn't mushy. And to be honest, because it is Impressionist music, then it adds something to it, doesn't it? And because the notes are so high, and because the pedal is being changed on the, no, it's not, is it? It's just being changed on the start of the bar. But it is perfectly possible, once you've played that, to lift the pedal. And actually, thinking about how I play that, and people will probably disagree with me here, as soon as I've got that chord in place, chord in place, I tend not to keep the pedal down. What I tend to do is take the pedal up again until I need it, and then I put it back again. So by doing it that way, I'm trying to keep things as clean as possible. I think there are plenty of people who wouldn't bother with that. I'm sure there are concert pianists out there who'll tell me I'm talking rubbish, and actually there's nothing wrong with keeping the pedal down because it is impressionism. It's just my OCD kicking in, probably, that I just want to keep that as nice and clean as possible. But you know, very often in music, you've got to think about the lesser of two evils. You know, sometimes your left hand will demand some pedaling, your right hand really won't, and then you'll have to decide what's going to give. Are you going to lose some pedaling so that the right hand becomes clean? Are you going to add a bit more pedaling and then have a bit of mush that you don't want? It's those kind of artistic decisions that you're going to come across. And again, I'll show you a technique that kind of deals with that in a few moments. But that in effect is the whole right hand thing, the indirect pedaling thing. There was one other, I'm sure I had one other thing to show you. Oh yeah, I just thought what we would do very briefly is just examine a couple of bars of music with no pedaling on it. This again is if you've done the course on Schumann that I've put up there. There's no pedaling on this, but Schumann, you know, 1810, 1856, this pedal was established on the piano at that point. It's hard to think that Schumann wouldn't have wanted to have pedal, and so he didn't bother writing any on. Of course, composers being composers as they are now, I won't bother. You do your own thing. What are we going to do with that? How are we going to organise that? I'm just going to stop for a tissue break, in fact, for a second. What are we going to do with that? Are we going to treat it like the Ravel? Not Ravel, the Satie. Are we going to have one pedal per bar? Are we going to have less? Are we going to have more? The best way to start to decide, to make these decisions, is just to suck it and see what one pedal per bar sounds like. Actually did two pedals in that second bar then, because I can't resist sticking a pedal in. My foot just does its own thing now. But you notice with that first bar, there's just too much of it. It's not transparent. The left hand sounds quite nice, but even that is a bit messy. So looking at this tune, which is descending, it's coming downwards. So again, remember, descending notes are more unforgiving than ascending notes. If I went upwards, that's actually all right. But actually you hear the higher notes blurring over the top. So it's a much better idea to keep your more excessive pedaling for rising phrases and make sure that you don't pedal things that go downwards. Looking at that first bar then, those notes are all next to each other. They're not part of a harmony. You know, that's not a chord. Well, it's probably a bit avant-garde, but it's no chord that Schumann might have used. So the safest thing to do would just be to pedal each individual note. So I'm now pedaling each individual beat. Okay, that means that in the left hand, I'm now pedaling two notes at once. Some of those notes kind of, you know, they don't necessarily work well with each other. The F and the G are not the greatest, but it's a case of balance. So the ears allow that to happen. So a nice kind of middle ground. We don't want to pedal every quaver. Then becomes no point, does there? And it sounds like there's a troop of horses coming through the garden as well. So we'll focus on pedaling the tune. Then we get to the second bar, and we can continue, even though there are 4 quavers there, we don't need to pedal each quaver. We don't need to go. We can just do this. And because these notes are so quick, again, we don't really hear too much of a blur. So when you're choosing what to do with your pedaling, listen to it, make sure you're not excessively pedaling. It's much better to do less than it is to do more. Pedaling is definitely one of those areas where less is definitely more. Make your pedaling transparent. So that's definitely nicer than no pedal, isn't it? It definitely gives it something, but it's not giving it so much that it's turning into, and I've heard that done so many times, it just turns into a mush. So yes, one, use the harmony to think about where the pedaling might occur, but secondly, you've got to look at the actual melody as well and make sure you're not blurring the melody too much. A little bit of blurring, I think, is acceptable in the interests of flow and art and all that, but you know, we don't want too much of a bad thing, and that just carries on in the same way. Now, there is one way of pedaling without pedaling, of course, and that's to use something called finger pedaling. And finger pedaling is the idea is that you keep your fingers down. So it's almost like the pedal is on because I'm keeping all the fingers down from that first. As soon as I've played the note in that bar, I keep it down as much as possible until I need to hit it again anyway. That effect is pretty much the same as not really a lot of difference. Now remember, in that piece I wouldn't want to be playing that with one pedal per bar anyway, but there are plenty pieces where you might think, well, I don't want to pedal it that way because there's too much going on. So you can introduce some finger pedaling. And so a lot of Mozart is we kind of almost assume we want to do finger pedaling because it can be very dry. For example, you know, the old favourite, that. It's quite dry. So finger pedal the left hand. Yeah, you can hear what I'm doing. The default is to keep the fingers down until they need to be played again. This makes it sound like they're being sustained. But the beauty of it is it doesn't mush up this. Because Mozart, like a lot of pre-romantic composers, we don't want to hear the pedal at all, not in Mozart. A lot of purists will say, don't pedal Mozart, don't ever pedal Mozart. I would say there are places where you can pedal Mozart. But one of the techniques of the time was to do this finger pedaling. One of the reasons was that early pianos, I mean, Mozart's piano was pretty ropey actually, it had very little sustain on it. And one of the reasons was just to create a bit of sustain on the thing in the first place, because early pianos didn't have that nice long sustain that modern pianos have. They were much more cut off, and so just doing this finger pedaling could just help to create something a little bit smoother anyway. But it's always a better option if you're pedaling Mozart or anything with an Alberti bass or a chordal bass. You know, the Bergmuller stuff as well, for example, will benefit from a lot of finger pedaling rather than going, which can be very dry. Build it up like that. It's like you've got a pedal down with no pedal. It's like magic. It's fantastic. And when you do dry as a bone in the right hand, it's brilliant. So it's definitely a technique to play around with and to work on, especially, as I said, in things like Mozart and early classical and some Beethoven. Anything where you've got a nice steady left hand, like an Alberti bass or a broken chord, but you don't want to do this because it's going to mush up the tune. As compared to, which suddenly sounds really kind of horrible, doesn't it? And kind of almost childish, really. So Mozart would have at least kept the lower note down, like that. But I think if you can, just keep everything down as long as possible. It's surprising. You get used to it. It just becomes another technique in your armory, and you get used to it after a while. So there we go. There's the sustain pedal, the damper pedal, as we call it, allowing notes to ring on, giving us a nice big sound. Direct pedaling just to create that nice big moment. Indirect pedaling to create connection between the notes, and finger pedaling when you're trying to be a little bit subtle and not do anything that's going to mess up your tune. As I say, particularly with classical Baroque composers. Oh, if you pedal Bach, some people will come after you for that. So you really want to be, the earlier you get with the music, basically the less pedal you want to attempt. I actually did watch a video where a very eminent teacher was talking about pedaling Bach, and he had some good arguments. But of course, Bach wouldn't have pedaled Bach. So it becomes an artistic choice. But if you think about it in terms of preserving the melody, it's all about preserving the melody. Let's not ruin the melody for the sake of a smooth accompaniment. So try to keep the melody as crisp as possible, and if you must use the pedal, and I use the term advisedly, try to keep, where possible, if we're not doing long notes, we could have a nice long pedal. With that, we can, there's not a lot of notes in the bar, you kind of get away with it. But where there are more notes and where they are a little bit less harmonic, I suppose another thing is, those notes are part of the chord, aren't they? So they pedal a lot nicer. You got a passing note, but so that actually it works better as a tune for pedaling anyway. Most of the time, you really want to err on the side of caution. So, right hand pedal. Left hand, we can do this a lot quicker now. That's the bulk of the thing out of the way now, because probably only about 1% of the time will you ever come across anybody using the left pedal. I can't recall ever seeing a marking on a piece of music that suggests the left pedal. I know there are some, because I've read books on pedaling and I've seen examples of pedaling, but I personally, in playing the music I've played, I think actually once I've come across an una corda on the music, and this pedal here is called the una corda pedal, this left hand pedal. It's played with the left foot. You got to imagine you driving. Well, I don't suppose you're American, because you don't use stick, as you call it, do you? You tend to be. Are you a stick driver? Or are you? Oh, good. Well, that's handy, because it's a bit like driving a manual, as we call it, a manual car. But instead of using your right foot for an accelerator and a brake, and again, I don't know how this works when the steering wheel is on the other side, whether the pedals are transposed or what. I've never driven one, but here in dear old Blighty, the right foot is used for these two pedals, the accelerator and the brake, and the left foot's used for the clutch. where we are driving stick. But for the piano, it's the other way around. We use that pedal, that foot, the right foot for the right pedal, and this foot for both of the left pedals. So we don't use this for anything. Now, this is such an important pedal that this foot's already got its work cut out just with that pedal. So this foot now is going to work these pedals. So that means we can actually use two pedals at once. The unicorda pedal, exactly what it says on the tin, is Italian for one string. I'm just going to have a quick wipe of the nose. I'm going to start sniffing again in a minute, and it'll get really annoyed. I'm going to make my Lemsip afterwards, I think. Oh, dear me. So, the one string. If you remember at the beginning, I said that every note has three strings associated with it. Not so much at the top. There are two strings usually on the top notes. But all these notes here will have three strings, and the hammer will be set up in such a way that it hits all three strings at the same time. So tricorder, if you like. And when we press the unicorda pedal, then I can never remember whether it's the hammers that move or the actual strings that move. I think it's probably the hammers that move. You can't move all the strings, surely. But the action is moved on the piano. And so what we actually get then is just one string being hit instead of three. So some people call it the quiet pedal, but it doesn't really make the piano any quieter. A better name is unicorda because of what it does. It just moves the hammers from three strings to one string, and that creates something that's thinner and something which suggests it's a little bit quieter. So again, if I that's with unicorda down, that's with it up. So you can hear that it's just a little bit more soft. It's not as thick. It's a thinner sound. It's a little bit more dampened down in terms of timbre, if you like. So that in connection with the sustain pedal will give you an alternative tone. It's quite different from that one. It's different, isn't it? Very, very different tone. I sometimes get my students to use it. If there is music on there that's double P, quite pianissimo, very quiet, or famously, there's one piece of music I did with a grade 7 student, and it was 5 Ps at the end. And so in order, 5. If you can imagine, why not 4 or 6? But artistic decision, 5 Ps. And so in order to try to recreate what we thought the composer was looking for, is we used the unicorda. It didn't mention the unicorda, but we used it anyway, and it just kind of created that. And it takes a little bit away from the volume, but it's not a third. It's not kind of a third as loud, because that's not how volume works, is it? But it does create something a little bit thinner, or something a little bit more. Excuse me. Something which is a little bit more on the wind, if you like. So it has its place. And I would experiment with the unicorda, because it's something. If you've got a quiet piece, you can just keep it down the whole time. You just put your foot down and forget it, and then you can use your other foot just as you might use that other foot. And it can make a really nice alternative. So that in effect is the unicorda. That was that quick. Again, like I said, you may see it on a piece of music in the wild. If you're very, very lucky and you get up really early and get the binoculars out, you may see the unicorda mark on a piece of music. But I think, like I said, I've only been playing 50 years, so there's time yet. But it's not exactly in your face. You don't see lots of it. Doesn't mean you can't use it though. Experiment, create your own tones. I would always suggest experimenting. I do. And I do it with students in their exam pieces. Even if it doesn't say do that, we'll try it on exam pieces. And usually we get nice comments for doing something a little bit different, because I can't imagine being an examiner listening to grade one pieces over and over again. So when you do something with a little bit of artistic flair, then, you know, even if it doesn't say do it, I'm very big on doing things that examiners, if it doesn't say on music, because invariably we always get nice comments about artistic decisions and things like this. So never treat the music like it's the finished thing. The music is your blueprint to start working from. Put that rallentando in at the end, even if it doesn't say it. Put the big slowdown in at the end. Put the dynamics in that you think it should have, that it doesn't say, but you feel like maybe it should have that. And put the pedaling in that you think it sounds nice with, even if it doesn't say that. So, una corda, beautiful. Brings us to the most, I mean, you think the unicorda is the one that's not used very much, but until you come across the sostenuto pedal. Sostenuto pedal is really, really modern. It's very modern indeed. It was only patented in 1875 by Steinway. And, you know, the pianos are still made with only two pedals, but some manufacturers put them on, some don't. But it was Steinway who introduced this third pedal. It wasn't introduced, it was invented, as I found out when I was researching this, by a French guy, or two French guys, I think possibly, who put the basic patent together, or the idea together, but it was Steinway who developed it. That was probably about 25 years earlier. But it was Steinway who kind of made use of it and put it on one of they put it on one of their instruments. So the sostenuto pedal, which is to do with sustain. So that's why I don't like calling this pedal the sustain pedal, because it's kind of confusing with the sostenuto. This is a damper pedal, and this sostenuto pedal, it does work the dampers, because that's how we create. That's how we create the sustain. But it's all it does, really. It's not like we can use it for creating texture or creating harmonics or anything like that. This is a one-trick pony, and possibly you may never use this pedal. I don't think I have played a piece. I've done the occasional bit of Chopin where it's been a good idea to use it, and I'll show you where that particular moment is in a second. But other than that, there's not really huge amounts of point to it. It's handy if you want to, say, for example, sustain a bass note, but then you want to play things normally up. Then what the sostenuto is doing is anything that's sustained when you press the pedal down continues to be sustained, but anything that's not down isn't sustained. It's genius, and I wish there was so much more use for it. But unless you've got a really big bass note that you want to sustain while you then play something over the top of that, people will tell me now there's all sorts of really interesting uses for the sostenuto pedal. That's the one that springs to mind, and that's the one that's usually cited when people give examples of sostenuto pedal use. Just that idea that you can keep something down, and then in combination with your damper pedal, because if you tried that with the sustain pedal, or sorry, with the damper pedal, you get mush. But if you do that with the sostenuto, in conjunction with the damper, you're allowed then to take your foot on and off the damper to change chords, but you still get that cutting through. Like that. And that's what it's for. And that, as I said, is probably the only use of that pedal I can think. I'm probably being a complete Philistine here. But, you know, I'm just a realistic pianist. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you don't need it, don't use it. That's my theory. If you're enhancing something, great, experiment. But if you think, well, it's a bit of a fad. The piano is littered with fads that were added to pianos over the years. I think in Mozart's time, actually, they were adding all sorts of strange bells and whistles to pianos. so you could make a whack whack noises and all sorts of weird things. And apparently, the piano was in danger of becoming a little bit of a toy or a passing kind of strange fad at one point, until people started taking it a bit more seriously and took off all the stuff that had been added, and then just left the basic piano again. But I think, excuse me, I think towards the end of the 18th century, people were getting a little bit excitable with what you could do with the piano, and it was sounding a little bit like P.D.Q. Bach. And if you've never come across P.D.Q. Bach, by the way, then I suggest you go and have a listen to some P.D.Q. Bach, because it's some of the funniest musical material you will ever hear in your life. I won't explain it now, but go on YouTube, type in P.D.Q. Bach, and go listen to one of his albums, because it's hilarious. Anyway, so that gives us our three pedals. We've done the damper pedal, we've done the unicorda, and we've done the sostenuto. We've worked out which feet to use for which. We know we can use two pedals at once. We wouldn't normally try to use three. There's not much point. I don't think you can use three. I'm not sure if it's a thing, you know. I can't remember now whether I've ever heard of anybody using both of those. I think that would be very difficult, wouldn't it? You couldn't do it, could you? No. Maybe it's not a thing. Excuse me. Don't know. Losing the will to talk now. It's all going. But other than that, that is probably everything you needed to know about pedalling, and some things that you didn't want to know about pedalling, but now you do. Has anybody got any questions on the use of the pedals, on anything to do with pedals, on anything to do with pedals in cars or on bikes or in stick shifts, or because I probably can't answer those. Or are we all good? Looks like we're all good. Okay, so that's that then. I hope you found that useful. I hope you found that really useful. And main thing is, I hope you're now going to take your ideas off to the keyboard and give them a try and see what you come up with. Particularly in terms of, if you're lucky enough to have an unicorda, it's a bit of a revelation when you start playing around with it and just start using it. As I said, if the pieces are quiet all the way through, you know, like some pieces are just quiet all the way through, aren't they? And you can use it, but there are pieces which will be a range of dynamics, but then they'll have a very quiet section. Don't be afraid of just jumping on the unicorda at that point, particularly if it's the start of a piece and it's you're just kind of bringing the thing in. It's nice to start with a little bit of unicorda. There's a grade 3 piece that I'm teaching at present that, in the second repeat, goes to PP, and we experimented with the unicorda, our student and I, and we decided to keep it in. So because it just gives a different, it just creates a difference at that point. It's a nice balance. I can't think of the word I'm trying to use here, but you know what I'm trying to say. But anyway, the main thing is to experiment with all the pedals. Try to keep your damper pedal as transparent as possible, though. That's the main thing, because you can really hear it when somebody's just started to learn the piano and they start playing with the pedal, and it's just everything becomes one big it's just like that, everything. So that's the one thing I would say. Just treat the damper pedal with a little bit of respect, with a good ear to hear what's going on. Always let your ears be your guide. That's the main thing, and you won't go far wrong. But if you're playing a piece and it's not marked up and you're not sure what to do, you know where to ask. You can always come and find me on the, on the chat group that we have, if you want to post any questions there on particular pieces that we can talk about. But other than that, then I shall go and take a lozenge. I think I might need a lozenge at this point, because there's something to stop me completely streaming now. But thank you for being here. I think Pam might have had to go and have a blood pressure done in the middle of all that. Don't know what happened, but I'm sure she'll watch the catch up anyway. Nice to see you all as usual, and hopefully I'll see you here again next week. I'm going to do some more harmony next week, so just get your harmony hats back on again. Have a great week, and as I say, hopefully see you next week. Take care now. Bye bye now.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.